Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beverly Arts Talk. This is your host, Matt McKinney, with the Beverly Arts Center. This issue of the podcast will be with visual artist Sandra Leonard, as she discusses her new exhibit, Elements of the Imagination, Sculptural Costumes and Paintings. The exhibit is at the Beverly Arts Center in the Cimmerling Gallery. The exhibit reception and opening will start on Friday, February 12th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., and the exhibit will run until March 27th. Please join us for a conversation about Sandra's brand new exhibit and much more. Welcome, Sandra. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Explain a little bit about your current exhibit, Elements of the Imagination, Sculptural Costumes and Paintings. What inspired you to create this exhibit, and what are some of the themes present in it?
Well, a big part of the exhibit are my costumes, which I have created over the last 3 years. And many of them were used in my performance piece called Wandering Bird, which was presented about 3 years ago at the Beverly Arts Center on stage. And I wanted to be able to show them in a gallery setting, because on the stage, the viewers don't really get to see all the detail. And this way, it's installed in a gallery. Viewers can come, they can look over the costumes and see more of the details and, be able to take it in. And so that was a big part of it, to show this group of costumes. And then there's a few new pieces as well. And then on the other side is I'm also showing my paintings. So most of the paintings were done in 2020. There are some older ones that go back 2 or 3 years, but for the most part, I have newer paintings there.
And what are some of the subjects of those paintings?
Not really. It's more about nature. It's very abstract. There's not really, I am inspired by nature, but then I abstract it. So it's just kind of crazy,
Yeah.
Now with the costumes, with the Wandering Bird, a lot of the costumes were inspired by birds, exotic birds or what different types of birds. And then I abstract that as well, to fit on the figure and then to go from there.
So when you are starting on a painting, this is always fascinating to me where artists start. Do you kind of come to it with a subject and then you make it more abstract, or you make it, or do you have like a starting point? You just kind of just go and wherever it ends.
Exactly. So how I like to work is I paint on fabric, first of all. And I start off using a dye, usually a black dye, and I kind of strange, but I put it in a syringe, like a dental syringe. And that way I kind of just apply it that way, and it goes very quickly. And that way I kind of do that in a very organic, just kind of go with it and just let things flow. So that is just really, and it's very abstract. Then I go back in usually the next day, because I'll let that set up 24 hours. And then I go back in with other dyes, usually diluted black dyes, and it's sometimes paint. And then I add my touches to it. So there's kind of that, so then there's that control part of it as well, where I go back in and I kind of develop what I see in the image that's kind of coming out. And then I just keep going back in and layering until I get to a point where I'm happy with where it's at.
And do you know when that point is? Are you in a moment when that happens? When it's,
No, rarely do I feel like it's finished. A lot of times I don't think it's finished, and then I live with it for a while, and then I'll go back in and I'll just think, it's finished. But then there's that line where you don't want to screw it up and make anything worse. I gotta get worried, like if I keep working it, then I might mess it up.
Right. Yeah. I as a musician, I get to work with music technology, so it's a little easier. I can edit, and if if I don't like something, if I've gone down a pathway that's the wrong pathway, I can always go back to an earlier copy. And visual artists just don't have that luxury. Have there been paintings that you did get to that point where you kind of scrapped it because you thought, I don't like where I went with this?
Right. Yes. I have I have several that I've rolled back up on tubes. They're all sitting in a room. And time to time, I'll unroll and look at it and think, do I want to work with this? And I think, nah. And I roll it back up and I stick it away again. And I revisit it every few months and I might look at it again. But usually, like right now, I'm kind of interested in just moving forward. And another thing this past year, 2020, I've really gotten into just working in black and white, and not using so much color. I don't know if it's a sign of the times, if it was because of that year, but it just felt like I didn't want to use color, where the old pieces I have all have color in it. So I'm not really into that right now.
What do you think changed that for you? Why do you think black and white? You said it was maybe the year. Was there something about this year in particular that made you want to black and white?
I just think it was a very stressful, complicated, chaotic time, I think, for everybody. And maybe it was a way for me to scale back in a way. I don't know. It just happened. I just kind of go with what I'm attracted to, what intuitively kind of comes to me, and I just go with it. And then maybe later I kind of question why, but I just kind of go from one thing,
So do you find certain colors then have very, very much like an emotive quality? What would be like the emotive differences between black and white and then say color?
Well, if you look at my costumes in the show, I did those over the last 3 years, and most of which, the two that I did last year are pretty much just black and whites and grays also. But the ones I did before have a lot of color. They're more joyful, I think. Just kind of bright colors. There's more of a joy to them. And where these are lacking, I think, a lot of that joy. So
in your bio, you mentioned that the Bauhaus inspired you as an artist. Mm-hmm. Can you explain a little about what you found in their work to be inspiring towards your own work, and what other artists that have inspired your work and why?
The Bauhaus came to me early on when I was younger, in my 20s, early 20s. I was actually I worked in interior design, and so I studied interior design. And that's when I first started to know the Bauhaus, because they were like this all-encompassing art is part of your life. It's part of your interior, your home. And so I really embraced that idea. I was an architecture minor and interior design major, and started taking classes in weaving and ceramics, and then sculpture, because I wanted to make my own furniture and metal. And I did that. But then I really became more interested in working with my hands and creating things. So I ended up changing to sculpture and decided that was my path, really. So I did furniture for a couple years. And then after that, I started abstracting the furniture and started creating these kind of abstract scenes or sets. And then I started bringing in costumes. Around the same time I was doing this was in Texas. Around the same time, I was able to go to Germany. And my mother's German. I was born there. My father was a military. So I was able to go back to Germany to visit some family. And I went to the Stadtgalerie in Stuttgart, which is where Oscar Schlemmer was from. And I saw Oscar Schlemmer's costumes there. And it just really had a profound impact on me. I was just awestruck. And I just remember standing there looking at it, and a couple years later, I started making costumes. And because I had a sculpture, this was in grad school now, because I had the sculpture background, I saw myself as a sculptor. I don't see myself as a fashion person or anything like that. I never studied fashion. And so I saw these as sculptural pieces on the figure and on the body.
So how do you take the Bauhaus artistic school of thought, and how do you incorporate that then with your own works exactly, as far as even just the colors and the shapes? And
yeah, they're really more primary colors, which I did a lot of that before, and now I'm to the black and white, and I've been thinking about in the costumes, black and white, but just bringing in some primary colors only. And I'm not sure exactly how. I think with stitch work and embroidery and things like that. I have a solo show coming up at the Evanston Arts Center in September. So that's what I'm thinking about doing for that show, like doing just black and white costumes, but bringing in a little bit of that primary color.
Yeah. So you do visual theater as well. Can you just explain to us what to our listeners what visual theater is and how you go about that, how you create that world?
It's my interpretation, first of all, but I call it visual theater because for me, when I do a performance, like when I did Wandering Bird, and by the way, Wandering Bird, they do have a monitor set up at the Beverly Arts Center so people can view the performance. It's a 45-minute performance. I see it as a visual experience purely. So I start off with the costumes and I create those, and then the people come in, and in the case of Wandering Bird, I had performance artists and I had also dancers, professional dancers that came in and they interpret the costume. And where the collaboration comes in is the way I design the costumes. It impedes movement. You can only move certain ways. You have to work with what you're given in a way. And then you add in the props and you add in the music, and there you go. And I'm not really concerned with a story. I think in theater, you start off with a script, and then the costumes and props come together to make sense of the story. It adds to the story, it contributes to the story, where for me, the costumes and the props, that's it. That's the story, So it's more of a visual experience. A lot of viewers come away with ideas, and they'll come up and talk to me afterwards like, I got it. I understood what you were doing. I understand the story. And I'm like, okay, cool. It's like,
oh, sure.
It's very loose, very loose. And I like it that way. And I do sometimes get people say, well, you really should have a script or a story. And I'm like thinking, why? I don't think I do. It's a visual. You know what I liken it to? You know who Alexander Calder is? Alexander Calder did sculpture, right? But he did a lot of these little mobiles hanging from the ceiling. And you think of that, looking at something hanging from the ceiling with all the different shapes and forms, and you're admiring it, and then it moves. And it moves through space, and the lighting changes, and you admire it. It's a visual experience. There's not a story to it. And I kind of see it like that, except I do it on a large scale on a stage,
Right. And also probably, you have a love for abstract art, it sounds like. So,
oh, yeah.
Storytelling sounds like, if you're going to tell a story, it's going to be an abstract one,
Exactly. It's like, very abstract. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. So when you're working with the dancers, are you do you kind of do you let them completely make up the choreography and choose the music, or is it very collaborative?
No, I choose the music because the music sets the tone, and you as a musician, you really know. So what I looked for, and I really like my soundtracks. I really do a lot of research and looking into, I do have a German background. I always go back to German, the Bauhaus and German things. I feel like that's kind of my roots. So when I first started looking, before Wandering Bird, when I first started looking for music, I typed in experimental German artist, and I found a guy, Hauschka, who I love, and it was pretty obscure back then. This was like 5 or 6 years ago, but I used him at the Art Center, and I used him, and then later when I did Wandering Bird, he became bigger. He got like an Oscar for The Lion. Mm-hmm. So I actually reached out to him and said, do I have permission? Yeah. And I went to see him at Links Hall, like a month before my show. Mm-hmm. And I met him. But he's very cool. I really like his music. So I incorporate his music. I really like his stuff. So I use his music. And then I used other music too with Wandering Bird. But the music's very important. It sets the whole tone, sets the mood. And I think it gives the performers something to work off of besides the costume, to give them a feeling. Because a costume is about physicality and the physical, I think, and then the music gives you that emotion.
Right. And what was it about Hashka's music that drew you to to pick his music?
Gosh, there's like a simplicity to it. He mostly uses a piano, and then he's very, very experimental, where he puts things like ping pong balls and different things in the piano, and he controls it. But there's also a real complexity to it. I don't know. I was just really drawn to it, and I felt like it really fit the work that I was doing very well. I thought, oh, this is the perfect music for my costumes.
So when you're working on your projects, I mean, I guess any projects, are you also listening to music in the background? What's your environment like in your studio? How do you
okay. For the most part, I listen to music. Sometimes it's quiet, and I listen to all kinds of music. I listen to a lot of 80s. I love Radiohead. That's probably the most I listen all the time to Radiohead. And people say, that's so depressing, but I don't find it depressing. I listen to a lot of David Bowie and things like that too. So just all different types of music.
Yeah. I mean, I love Radiohead. I could see how that would be very inspiring on any visual artwork. Tom York is my guy. I love that guy.
Oh, he's great. He did a video, I can't remember the name of it, in a collaboration with somebody that was really cool. I'll let you know if I think of it.
Yeah, he's worked with someone. I mean, Bjork, he did the Dancer in the Dark, and I mean, he's had a lot of his like little side projects, but also Radiohead, they come out with an album every 4 years, 5 years or so. But
yeah, he's a genius, isn't he?
Yeah. It's always an when the Radiohead albums are going to come out, that it's you actually set aside like that day to like take it in,
Mm-hmm. I think music is probably the number one influence on my work.
Mm-hmm.
I love listening to different types of music. I like Leon Bridges and Michael Kiwanuka. I like the Black Pumas now. I've been listening to that. So I don't know. That's where I find most of my inspiration is music.
Yeah. Another Bauhaus guy, Kandinsky, I think was you know about Kandinsky and how he would use music to constantly work on his projects as well.
Yeah, and he named him like Boogie and stuff. My understanding about Kandinsky, I don't know if this is true. I heard that when he heard music, he actually saw streaks of colors.
See, that's a like a phenomenon that I think is one of the coolest things. That doesn't happen to me when I make music. I really just, I hear it. I feel emotion very much, but
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I try to visualize what it's like, but I don't get the and I can't remember what that synesthesia, I think, is what it's called, when you can hear it and you see it all at once. And it's all of these senses coming together. I don't get that. I wish I did, though.
Yeah.
So then tell us a little bit more about your environment that you're working in.
I'm very fortunate. My studio is here in Beverly. It's a block from my house, and it's in a church. So I have really beautiful lighting, the cool windows. It's really old. I have a nice space. I'm very happy. And because of COVID, it's pretty much shut down. So I'm the only one there. Mm-hmm. So it's very quiet. And I like it that way. I like working in solitude. I don't really like to have people around, and I'm not really interested in hosting things in my studio, especially when it used to make me nervous when we'd have open houses and everybody's drinking red wine in my studio or in my costumes. And I'd be like, oh no, don't go in my, but, no, I like it. I'm very happy. I feel like I'm in a good place right now.
Are you in there every day
Pretty much, yes. I've taken this last week off because after I installed the show, just kind of trying to catch up around the house now.
How has 2020, how has that had an effect on you as an artist? Has there been a big difference? I mean, you've talked about your color palette changing, but
yeah, it's been good and bad. You know, I do watch way too much news, and my husband is a news junkie, so way too much news. So it's very depressing and very stressful, a lot of anxiety, which when I go to my studio, I'm actually trying to escape.
Right.
A lot of artists talk about politics or the social issues in their work, and I respect that. But I feel like I'm inundated already, and I want an escape, and I'm always trying to build my own self, like in a positive, trying to keep things to positive, good vibrations, that bit. And so when I go to my studio, I always feel like this sigh of relief. Every time I walk in, it's like, ah, and I just feel like I've stepped into my sanctuary and it's my happy place. I never listen to talk stuff, only music or silence. But I don't allow anything negative to come in. It's the one place where it's my good place, It's the one place I can go that's safe and happy, or I try to be happy.
Yeah. Yes, I completely understand. When I'm working on any music, I really can't have anything on. As far as news or I have to be alone. And I don't even like it when I share like songs that are, half written or even little doodles, I guess, to be finished. And sometimes I don't finish them if I show people. I've realized.
Yeah, it's best not to share things, because if you get negative feedback, it can stop things.
Yeah.
I try not to let that happen, to stop things, but it does. And I've learned over time, recently, not that long, that I don't anymore. I don't ask people their opinion too much anymore, because a lot of times, especially with the costumes, they don't understand what to say about it. They're just kind of like, well, yeah, that's nice. The worst word in the world, interesting and nice. Right. So I've learned, like, I don't want to ask for people's opinion. It's one thing to have constructive criticism.
Sure.
But
that's a whole other thing,
It's a whole other thing, but that's not usually what happens. That's not what you know.
And I try not to even ask for that now.
I just do what I do, and I put it out there, and
exactly.
We'll see.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You've worked with the Artists Interpret Shakespeare, and can you tell us a little bit about your work with that group?
Yeah, this was a few years ago, and I haven't done anything. I guess it's been like 3 years since our last show. It's a group of artists, Chicago artists, very nice group of people. And I just happened to know a couple of the artists in the group, and they invited me to join with my costumes. And at the time, prior, like 5 years ago and stuff, a lot of my costumes were inspired by historical costumes, like Renaissance and things. So I thought that was a really nice fit. I did my own interpretation of like Renaissance and stuff, and then I was able to show it with them.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good experience. We showed in different places: Elmhurst Museum, Addington Gallery, just at the Beverly Art Center. That was probably my first show with them, was at the Art Center.
And you said you haven't worked with them for about 3 years or so, or it's been a while. So.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, do you any plans to get back with them when things are?
I don't know. They have the curators. There's 3 curators, and I think once they put something together, they'll probably reach out again. I think it's just not much has been going on right now because of COVID and
right and
showing.
What do you think is going to happen when we're allowed to get back? Is it going to be strange for everybody to hang out again socially and?
Yeah. I can't wait. It's like I plan on going to a lot of openings and a lot of shows. It's like I can't, that's one thing I do miss, just that kind of socializing, and I look forward to openings again.
Yeah, I'm very much an introvert, but even as an introvert, I realize how much I miss that social interaction, or just the ability to go to a restaurant and
yeah.
And just being away from people for so long, or talking over Zoom, you do realize a change in just the way you interact. So I think it's just going to be a shock to the system getting back.
Yeah, you might have to like dip your toe in the water, so to speak, right?
Time. It's 3
Yeah,
months.
just a little. But on a positive note about the last COVID is I really loved a lot of you're talking about being an introvert. I have discovered that I'm very much of an introvert. I never thought of myself because I'm not a shy person. I have no problem meeting people. So I always thought of myself as being just extrovert. And there's a part of that, yes. But I have really enjoyed being on my own and by myself. I haven't really missed it. I haven't missed the parties and the socializing that much. Now it's been a year. I'm thinking, okay, when spring and summer comes, I'll be ready to get out there again. But I've actually kind of enjoyed just focusing on my work.
Yeah.
Being in the studio and just thinking about what I'm doing and just having that quiet time has been so nice in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, that quiet time is so important for reflection. I think
Mm-hmm.
artists during this time have had moments to really reflect and start to work on their projects. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited what the future holds for what artists have been working on through all of 2020 and
Mm-hmm.
2021. I think there's a lot to look forward to as far as of the art that's going to be coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, as an introvert, I think of extrovert. Introvert is more like energy, where
Mm-hmm.
I think when I talk with lots of people, my energy is more or less depleted at the end of the day. And when I
Yeah,
feel like I'm
I
re-energized
agree.
alone. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I think too much of that alone time, too much isolation is also not good for you. So,
Yeah, and I don't have that problem because I have a family.
mm-hmm.
I have my husband, I have a teenage son, and I have a daughter in college, but she spent a lot of time here first. And then she has somebody that was here with her. Her girlfriend spent time with us. So they just left. And it's kind of nice that they're off again. But I've had people around the house. So that's nice.
Yeah. One question I didn't get to ask, and I meant to ask earlier, but did you have a mentor or a teacher that was really important to you? Or did you just kind of do everything on your own and just?
The only thing I could think of is pretty much on my own, and which is fine. I'm kind of, when I was starting off very young, like 20, 21, I actually took like gap years and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went to work for an interior design firm, which was just a lucky thing. I was very much interested. I've always been interested in art and design. So I went to work for this design firm and I was the assistant to 4 different designers with 4 very different styles, 4 different people. And so I learned a lot about design, spatial relationships, in an interior or in a space. And we were doing big homes and all different types of spaces. So I worked with these different people doing different things, working with the fabrics and how to coordinate things, put colors together. So I learned a lot from them. And then that's when I went to school and started studying interior design. Just as it progressed, I lost interest in interior design and went into the arts. And sometimes I think, oh,
What else? What else do you think you would have gone into had you not gone into the arts? Could you have seen yourself in another profession or?
Not really. I always think that probably be some kind of a scientist, but really not. I'm interested in physics, but I don't have the math for it, the math skills that would take for that. So that wouldn't have been an option.
Yeah. I think about this too all the time for myself, and then it always comes back to I just don't think I could ever let it go. I mean, even if I did fall into another profession, I think on a hobbyist level, I would probably come back to music all the time. And
Mhm. I really liked architecture a lot. Back then, when I was taking the classes, ACAD was just coming along, so most of it was just drafting by hand, and I really loved it. I love drafting. So,
is there a style that you don't like that like just turns you off in the architecture or in the arts in general?
well, There is a lot of conceptual art that I am not into. Some of it, yes, but some of it, no. I think that when you're a visual, this is my opinion, when you're a visual artist, you should be able to connect through your art visually. And I don't feel like you should have to write an essay about it and post it on the wall to explain yourself. Sometimes I feel like it's trying to make your art relevant in a way. So that's a bit of a turnoff for me. And the other little turnoff is when things are real sloppy. And that's just, if you look at my work, I'm just not sloppy. I really care about detail. I like everything to be done correctly and, put together in a professional looking way, to be crafted well. So that's just something that's important to me. So when I walk into a show and it looks real sloppy and kind of like piled up and thrown together, that's a turn off for me.
Mm-hmm. Do you see that a lot, or in today's?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do see that. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright out here in Beverly. Are you a fan of Frank Lloyd Wright?
Yeah, somewhat. I do. I mean, I appreciate him. He's not my favorite. I really like Gaudi, and I like more. And I'm so old-fashioned now. I don't really keep up with what's in now and what people are doing now. But I love Frank Gehry, who did Millennium Park and Bilbao, and I love Corbu. That's about it. Yeah. I like Gaudi a lot. I was able to go to Spain and go to Barcelona and see his work. Oh, and when I was there visiting, I happened to go to the museum there in Madrid, and there was Oscar Schlemmer's costumes again.
Wow.
It's just like, oh my God. So I thought, oh, that's a good sign.
Yeah. So, and then all these artists, do you think they kind of like subliminally or subconsciously are always with you when you're making your own works, and your costumes? And
I think sometimes, yeah. You know what? I like to read and I like to reference things. So I'm always looking and reading. Right now I'm reading a book on Dubuffet. I love his painting, and it's very different than what I do, but I really love how he builds things up, and it's really textural and kind of harsh, which is not what I do, but I like his work, and I'm reading him now. I look at Paul Klee, and I'll just like that freedom and childlike quality he has, but there's also like a very complexity to him. It's looks simple on the surface, but if you really examine, it's not. So, and he was with the Bauhaus for a bit too, but he was more a Dada. And Dada and Surrealism both had a big influence on my work and performance art.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it sounds like performance art, definitely, with what you do with visual theater. So, Sandra, can you tell us now the day and the dates of your exhibition? I don't think I got to mention that. So let our audience know where we can.
Yeah. So it's at the Beverly Arts Center in Beverly, to Chicago. And now the hours are Tuesday through Saturday from 2 to 7. I just reached out to Dan today. And and I am going to plan a couple of meet and greets, like on a Saturday, to go for a couple hours in case people want to stop by and say hello or talk to me about things, about the work. And at February 12th from, I want to say 6 to 8, there's going to be an opening reception. And I believe the show's up till like March 22nd or something, till the end of March.
March, yeah. And your website, can we get your website?
That's easy, www.sandraleonard.com.
Perfect.
That's easy.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's really been enjoyed talking with you, and looking forward to seeing the exhibit.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, listeners, for joining us for another episode of Beverly Arts Talk. This has been your host, Matt McKinney, with visual artist Sandra Leonard. Please come see her exhibit in the Cimberlane Gallery running from February 12th until March 27th. And as always, if you're feeling so kind, please donate to the Beverly Arts Center at www.beverlyartscenter.org. Thank you all for listening. Please be well and be safe.